When Snoke first appeared in The Force Awakens, he was framed as the next great Star Wars villain. A shadowy overlord, scarred and mysterious, pulling the strings behind Kylo Ren and the First Order. He was teased as the kind of character who could rival Palpatine, maybe even surpass him. Fans filled in the blanks with theories, and the hype machine went into overdrive. Snoke was supposed to matter. But the deeper we got into the sequels, the clearer it became that Snoke didn't matter at all. He had no backstory, no motivation, no real presence beyond the golden robes and big holograms. He barked orders, spouted generic Sith-sounding lines, and sat on a throne that looked borrowed from Palpatine's garage sale. This wasn't a villain. This was cosplay. Then came The Last Jedi, where Snoke was hyped as the big obstacle standing between Kylo and Rey. Instead, he was killed off halfway through the movie in the least satisfying twist imaginable. One second he's bragging about his unlimited vision. The next he's sliced in half by a lightsaber he couldn't see sitting right next to him. It wasn't shocking. It was embarrassing. Fans who had spent years speculating suddenly realised there was nothing to speculate about. And just when you thought it couldn't get dumber, the rise of Skywalker revealed the truth. Snoke was never real, never important, never anything more than a lab experiment on Exegol. Rows of failed clones in vats, a literal puppet for Palpatine's strings. The mysterious big bad of the sequels was reduced to a disposable science project. It was the ultimate narrative cop-out. The tragedy is that Star Wars used to excel at villains. Vader terrified audiences, Palpatine embodied corruption, Maul left a mark with just minutes of screen time. Even characters like Tarkin or Jabba carried weight. Snoke had the setup, the design, the aura of menace, but none of the substance. He became the poster child for wasted potential. In this video, we're going to break down why Snoke was such a failure, how the sequels turned him from a mystery into a meme, and why he stands as one of the dumbest villains not just in Star Wars, but in blockbuster history. Amai Sijimori. This wasn't some random side villain. This was the big bad of the sequel trilogy, the shadowy figure pulling the strings behind Kylo Ren and the First Order. Fans immediately started speculating about who he really was. Was he Darth Plagueis, the master of Palpatine? Was he some ancient Sith Lord from the unknown regions? Or maybe even a corrupted clone experiment tying back to the prequels? The mystery was the point, and the build-up was huge. The marketing leaned into this mystery. Snoke was always shown in holograms, shrouded in shadow, his size distorted to make him appear more imposing. The design itself screamed importance. Scarred face, golden robes, deep commanding voice. Everything about him felt engineered to signal that this was the next Emperor Palpatine. A character so powerful and terrifying that the new heroes would have to work for 3 movies to defeat him. And fans bought into it. For the first time since 1983, Star Wars had given us a villain who felt like he might rival Palpatine in menace. Theories exploded online, videos were dedicated to breaking down every line of dialogue, and fans treated Snoke's identity as the ultimate mystery box. The expectation was that The Last Jedi would peel back layers and reveal something mind-blowing. This was the new era of Star Wars, and Snoke was supposed to be the anchor of its darkness. But here's the problem. There was never a plan. J.J. Abrams set Snoke up as the Emperor figure without any real backstory in mind, hoping that someone else would figure it out later. Rian Johnson then took the character in The Last Jedi and decided he didn't matter at all. The result was a villain who looked important but collapsed under the weight of his own mystery. He went from terrifying to meaningless in record time. The Last Jedi killed him off without ceremony. One second he's boasting about how powerful and all-seeing he is, the next he's cut in half by a lightsaber he somehow didn't notice. It wasn't clever, it wasn't shocking in a good way, it was anticlimactic. Fans who spent 2 years speculating about Snoke's true identity suddenly realised there was nothing to speculate about. He wasn't anyone, he wasn't important, he was just filler until Kylo Ren took centre stage. This wasn't just a waste of potential, it was a betrayal of setup. Star Wars had always been about payoffs. Anakin's fall, Luke's destiny, Vader's redemption. Even the prequels, flawed as they were, had a plan. Snoke was the opposite. a hollow placeholder that was never meant to be more than a red herring. And that lack of planning is what made him so dumb. By the time the rise of Skywalker rolled around, the damage was already done. Snoke returned only to be revealed as a literal puppet of Palpatine, created in a vat on Exegol. Suddenly the character who was teased as the new Emperor was reduced to a disposable plot device, a lab experiment with no agency of his own. That revelation confirmed what fans already suspected. Snoke was never real. He was a prop, not a character. And that is why he fails even harder than villains like General Grievous or Count Dooku. At least they had purpose. At least they played roles in the larger story. Snoke's only role was to look scary until the writers decided they were done with him. That's not a villain. That's a narrative dead end. The second angle is about what Snoke's failure says about the sequels as a whole. Because his story, or lack of one, isn't just about one bad villain. It's about how the entire trilogy was built on improvisation instead of vision. And Snoke is the clearest example of how that approach backfired. The Force Awakens set him up as a mystery box. But instead of developing him, The Last Jedi threw him away to subvert expectations. Then the Rise of Skywalker scrambled to explain him as a Palpatine puppet. This wasn't storytelling, it was damage control. And the fact that a character positioned as the trilogy's big bad was treated like a hot potato proves just how messy the sequels were behind the scenes. Snoke's lack of depth also reveals how much the sequels leaned on nostalgia instead of originality. He was essentially a copy-paste of Palpatine, an old, deformed Sith, like figure in gold robes giving orders from a throne. But without the layers of history that made Palpatine interesting, Snoke just felt hollow. It's like Disney wanted the iconography of a Star Wars villain without doing the work to make him compelling. Compare him to Palpatine in the prequels. Even if you already knew he was the Emperor, watching his rise to power, his manipulations in the Senate, and his seduction of Anakin gave him depth. Snoke had none of that. He appeared fully formed with no explanation, demanded fear without earning it, and then died before we learned anything meaningful. That is why fans call him one of the dumbest villains. He literally had nothing under the surface. And the sequels wasted Andy Serkis, one of the most talented actors in the business. This is the guy who brought Gollum and Caesar to life, with nuance and depth. But as Snoke, he was reduced to barking generic lines like, "I trained Kylo Ren," and "I see his every intent." Lines that make him sound powerful until you realise they mean nothing, because the character himself means nothing. It also undercuts Kylo Ren's arc. Killing Snoke was supposed to be a shocking moment where Kylo seizes power. But because Snoke had no backstory or real weight, the moment doesn't land. It's like bragging about beating a final boss in a video game, only to realise it was just a tutorial level disguised as the big fight. Kylo's rise feels cheap because the man he killed was never real competition. And then the Rise of Skywalker pulled the rug out again by revealing Palpatine was behind it all. Which makes Snoke's existence even dumber. Why not just bring Palpatine back earlier if that was the plan? Why waste time on a puppet nobody cared about? The only answer is that the filmmakers didn't know what they were doing until the last minute. Snoke embodies the worst habits of the sequels. Mystery without payoff, setup without plan, spectacle without substance. He is a symbol of wasted potential, not just as a villain, but as a reminder of how much Star Wars suffered without a clear roadmap. When fans no longer trust that new antagonists will matter, the stakes of the saga collapse. And Snoke is the reason so many people feel that way about modern Star Wars. Think about it. When Thrawn was teased for Ahsoka, fans were excited, but also skeptical. Because after Snoke, why trust that the writers will actually give us a compelling villain with a meaningful arc? Snoke trained audiences to expect letdowns. He conditioned fans to assume that mystery equals disappointment. That's a terrible legacy for a character who was supposed to be terrifying. Snoke's failure also damaged Kylo Ren's credibility. Instead of being the apprentice of a powerful master, he turned out to be the pawn of a pawn. That makes his arc less impressive, because his rebellion against Snoke loses weight when Snoke himself wasn't important. Imagine how much more powerful Kylo's turn would have been if Snoke had real history, real menace, and real influence. Instead, he just killed a puppet, and that doesn't make him look stronger. It makes him look lucky. And the Palpatine reveal in The Rise of Skywalker only made things worse. Not only did it erase Snoke's importance, it also undermined Palpatine himself. The greatest villain in Star Wars was reduced to a cartoon scientist making clone puppets in jars. Instead of elevating the saga, it made the galaxy feel smaller, less creative, and less believable. Snoke wasn't just dumb, he dragged everything down with him. This has ripple effects on the entire franchise. Fans now look at new projects with suspicion, wondering if characters like the Grand Inquisitor, Gideon, or even Thrawn will get the same treatment. Will they be built up only to be killed off pointlessly? Will they be revealed as puppets for yet another Palpatine scheme? That uncertainty kills excitement because it teaches the audience that investment is a waste of time. The saddest part is that Snoke could have worked. A mysterious ancient Sith, a rival to Palpatine, or even a dark side cult leader tied to the unknown regions. All of those ideas would have given him depth. Instead, the sequels chose the laziest option possible, and fans are still shaking their heads years later. That is why he stands as one of the dumbest decisions in Star Wars. And the irony is that Star Wars has always been great at villains. Vader, Palpatine, Maul, even smaller characters like Tarkin and Jabba. They all had presence, purpose, and impact. Snoke is the outlier, the one villain who looked important but meant nothing. He's the participation trophy of Star Wars villains, memorable only because of how badly he was handled. So when we ask if Snoke was the dumbest villain in Star Wars, the answer isn't just yes. It's that he redefined what dumb villainy looks like. Not because he was weak, but because he was meaningless. And that, more than anything else, proves how badly the sequels wasted their chance to create a new iconic villain, Conic.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.